Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. That particular autumn night, steeped in the scent of damp concrete and decay, etched itself into my existence, the night I stumbled upon the dark machinery grinding away within the repository's belly. It began as just another rotation through the quiet hours, a predictable rhythm soon shattered by a desperate scramble for survival that irrevocably altered the trajectory of my life. Silas, that's the name I answer to. For 3 years, the graveyard shift at the Apex Colossal storage facility had been my domain. Scarcely a pulse-quickening occupation, true, but it funded existence and afforded vast, echoing tracts of time for nurturing the novel simmering within me. Or so the narrative went before that Tuesday blew in. Late October unleashed a wind that shrieked like a banshee around the corrugated steel corners, animating every elongated shadow. I'd commenced my watch, ensconced in the glass-walled security kiosk, a steel thermos radiating warmth beside my well-worn journal, the initial hours unspooled without incident. Patrols involved the familiar litany, testing lock tumblers, casting my flashlight beam down cavernous aisles stacked high with the dormant possessions of others. The repository was immense, a vertiginous labyrinth of metal racks, clawing towards the unseen roof. Usually, I found a strange solace in the isolation, but this night, dissonance hummed beneath the surface. Perhaps it was the wind torturing the metal skin of the building into groans and sighs. Or maybe my own fiction, a particularly taut chapter penned that afternoon, had bled into reality, priming my nerves. Whatever the source, the conviction that I shared the space clung stubbornly. Around the second hour past midnight, I discerned it. A fragile sound, nearly swallowed by the building's ambient respiration. Yet years navigating the nocturnal world had honed my hearing. This note was alien. I silenced the flickering monitor in the kiosk, straining. It surfaced again, a distinct metallic chink, followed by the murmur of suppressed voices. The origin, the repository's northern quadrant, a sector designated as inert, empty. A frantic drumbeat commenced against my ribs. This wasn't the familiar scrabble of an errant raccoon or the groan of settling crates. This bore the unmistakable signature of human presence. Instinctively, my hand sought the radio clipped to my belt. As my thumb depressed the transmit key, only static answered. The northern reach lay beyond the transmitter's grasp, a dead zone swallowed by the sheer density of steel and distance. A precipice. Retreat to the kiosk, summon the authorities, and risk the intruders melting away, or venture forth, gather irrefutable proof. Hindsight screams the sensible path, the call for backup, but in that charged moment, propelled by a surge of adrenaline, and perhaps an inflated sense of capability borrowed from my fictional protagonists, I chose the latter. Flashlight clutched tight, I advanced towards the northern sector, each footfall placed with deliberate silence, the voices amplified, coalescing into fragments. "Quicker, damn it, the clock's bleeding," one rasped impatiently. "Moving as fast as I can," retorted another, strained. "This consignment weighs a ton." Drawing nearer, my pulse hammered a frantic rhythm I feared they must surely perceive. Rounding a towering stack of anonymous containers, the scene unfolded. 5 figures swathed in dark attire, maneuvering crates onto a waiting forklift. One crate, split open under a crowbar's persuasion, snagged my recognition. Logged the previous week, labeled Precision Electronics, bound for a city tech firm. But spilling from its splintered confines were not circuit boards, but the cold, blue-black forms of firearms. My breath hitched. The blood in my veins turned to ice. This wasn't mere pilfering. This was trafficking on a scale that resonated with profound danger. Perhaps I gasped. Perhaps a boot scuffed too loudly. A head snapped up. Eyes locked with mine across the intervening space, and the world momentarily suspended its rotation. Then chaos detonated. "Intruder!" the man bellowed, his hand darting to his waistband. Thought evaporated. Instinct took over. I spun, feet pounding against the unforgiving concrete, fleeing into the metallic maze. Behind me, shouts erupted, punctuated by the heavy tread of pursuit. I plunged through the aisles, banking hard around corners, desperately seeking refuge within the labyrinth's embrace. But they navigated the terrain with unnerving familiarity. Each attempted evasion led me deeper into their web, until I found myself slammed against a dead end, the echo of approaching footsteps converging from both directions. Trapped. My gaze darted wildly, seeking any advantage, any sliver of concealment. Then, salvation or its approximation. A narrow fissure between 2 colossal wooden crates, barely wide enough to admit a body. Without a second thought, I hurled myself into the gap, splintered wood tearing at my clothes and skin. I held my breath, a statue carved from fear as the men pounded past, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness, momentarily illuminating my cramped prison. A fleeting hope flickered only to be extinguished by a voice nearby. "Comb every shadow, every crevice. He can't have dematerialized." Time was bleeding away. They would find me. A plan. I needed one instantly. Trembling fingers fumbled for the mobile phone in my pocket. Predictably, no signal bars graced the screen. Despair threatened to engulf me until a forgotten function surfaced in my memory. The emergency call. Even networkless, it might connect to 911. With digits shaking uncontrollably, I stabbed at the screen, pressing the phone hard against my ear. The connecting tone stretched into an agonizing eternity. 911, state your emergency. Never had a voice sounded so celestial. In a choked whisper, I relayed the nightmare. Apex Colossal Storage, armed men, smuggling weapons. I'm concealed. They're searching. Hurry, please. Sir, remain calm. Units are en route. Can you maintain the line? Before comprehension could form an answer, rough fingers clamped around my ankle, wrenching me violently from my sanctuary. The phone skittered across the floor, the operator's distant voice swallowed by the sudden proximity of danger. I was hauled upright, staring into the glacial fury of eyes peering from behind a ski mask. Thought you could play hide and seek, rent-a-guard? The voice dripped with contempt. Dragged back to the staging area, my arms were brutally bound behind me, and I was forced to my knees on the cold concrete. "What's the play with him?" one of the figures inquired. The apparent leader, a tall man distinguished by a jagged scar bisecting his cheek, regarded me with cold calculation. "Loose ends are liabilities," he decreed, his voice flat. "Deal with him. Then we finish loading and vanish." A leaden weight crushed my chest. This was the terminus. My final moments played out in this echoing tomb, a casualty of misplaced curiosity and foolish pride. As one of the men leveled a pistol, I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable oblivion. Instead of the weapon's report, the most exquisite symphony I could imagine pierced the tension. Police sirens faint at first, then rapidly swelling, converging. The warehouse exploded into pandemonium. The smugglers scattered like roaches under light, weapons clattering as they bolted for shadowed exits. Shouts of "Police, freeze!" reverberated through the vast space, accompanied by the thunder of boots. When I dared to open my eyes, uniformed officers swarmed the area. One knelt beside me, expertly severing the bindings on my wrists, his voice urgent. "Are you injured?" The subsequent hours dissolved into a disorienting montage of questions, statements, flashing lights. Most of the crew were apprehended, though a few had slipped the net. The scale of the uncovered operation was staggering. A sophisticated weapon smuggling conduit operating undetected for months, directly beneath my nightly patrols. As dawn painted long skeletal shadows through the high windows, a detective approached. "Silas," he addressed me, his tone measured. "Your actions tonight, they likely averted untold tragedies. The ordnance recovered here, let's just say its potential for devastation was immense." I could only nod, still reeling from the night's brutal passage. "Just doing my job," I managed, the words feeling inadequate. A wry smile touched the detective's lips. "You exceeded the parameters significantly, showed genuine nerve. Ever contemplated a future in law enforcement?" A weak, involuntary laugh escaped me. "Think I've absorbed my lifetime quota of excitement, thank you." Yet, watching the methodical police work unfold, a profound internal recalibration was occurring. The fear, the adrenaline, they were receding, supplanted by an unfamiliar sensation, a nascent sense of purpose. My quiet nights of solitary patrols and crafting fictional dangers felt suddenly hollow. I had brushed against the raw edge of real peril, witnessed genuine courage in action, and the retreat to mere observation felt impossible. In the ensuing weeks, the detective's question echoed persistently. Perhaps there was substance to it. Maybe I possessed the necessary grit to contend with the world's darker currents, not just chronicle them. 6 months later found me enrolled in the police academy. The path wasn't facile, the training regimen was punishing. But whenever doubt surfaced, the memory of that night in the repository surged back. The unexpected reservoir of courage tapped when everything hung in the balance. Now, navigating the city arteries in a patrol car, my thoughts occasionally drift back to the Apex Colossal Storage, to that singular night when the mundane violently collided with the extraordinary, forever altering my course. And I understand with chilling clarity that the most profound adventures and the deepest shadows often lie dormant within the utterly commonplace. All it demands is the audacity to investigate that anomalous sound in the deep of night, and the crucial wisdom to recognize when the call for reinforcement is not just prudent, but paramount. The deep woods hold no allure for me now, not since that passage through the Serpent Spine wilderness last month. My friends murmur about melodrama, a nervous tick behind their forced smiles, but they weren't the ones mapping the metamorphosis of those cries in the dark, awake through every chilling modulation. Months we'd charted this escape, myself, Leo, Ronan, our navigator, Silas, the ever-documenting eye, and quiet Julian. Seattle's concrete embrace had tightened, and we craved the decompression only wilderness promises. Ronan knew a place, a secluded basin 4 hours eastward, nestled far from marked paths, a haven meant to swallow us whole, safe from intrusion, yet tethered loosely enough to prevent true disorientation, or so the illusion went. The ascent was unremarkable. Ronan's hulking vehicle devoured the miles, laden with shelters, sleeping rolls, and a pharmacopoeia of sustenance and amber ale, sufficient for 3 days. Radio signals fractured, dissolved into static as the asphalt surrendered to gravel, then dirt, the mountains swallowing connectivity whole. We didn't mind. Silas dispensed his worn-out jests. Julian drifted into slumber in the rear compartment, and I watched, through the passenger glass, the trees assemble into a denser, inkier legion. We reached the trailhead near 3 in the afternoon. The lot lay vacant, save for a solitary rust-pocked pickup bearing Montana plates, an incongruous sentinel. Ronan guided us down the primary artery of the trail for perhaps 2 miles, before veering onto an almost invisible capillary path, a fissure in the undergrowth I'd have surely missed. Vegetation clawed at our packs, a persistent scratching against nylon as we pressed deeper. Another mile dissolved beneath our boots before the woods relented, opening into the basin. It sprawled larger than anticipated, 100 feet maybe, encircled by sentinel pines piercing the sky. A great fallen log, bleached bone white by sun and time, lay near its heart. The ground, a tapestry of short grasses and verdant moss cushions, offered itself flat and welcoming, ideal. We pitched our small domes in a loose constellation, mine oriented eastward, Ronan's flanking my right, Silas's next, and Julian's closing the arc. The process lagged, punctuated by Silas's compulsive need to capture moments for his digital audience. By the time our canvas shelters stood taut, the sun bled low, casting elongated, spectral figures across the clearing. Ronan coaxed flames to life, while Julian and I gathered fallen limbs. Silas fussed with his sophisticated camp stove, conjuring steam for our foil-packed dinners. The air, thin and sharp, bit with the coming night, a typical mountain chill for September. Jackets were donned, bodies drawn instinctively to the nascent fire's warmth. Ales were cracked, the familiar rhythm of traded stories and gentle mockery, mostly aimed at Silas's recent romantic implosion, settling over us. 11:42 p.m. The exact moment remains etched, courtesy of a glance at my phone's lifeless screen, a brief flare of irritation at the digital void. That's when the first scream tore through the night, distant a mile perhaps, yet it sliced cleanly through the fire's crackle and our fading laughter. Conversation died instantly. What in God's name was that? Julian's voice was tight, his posture suddenly rigid on the log. "Cougar, maybe," Ronan offered, though the conviction felt thin, forced. "They can mimic a woman screaming sometimes." I'd heard the cry of a mountain cat before. This bore no resemblance. Words coiled within the sound, indistinct fragments, yet undeniably human in cadence. It came again, stretched longer, a keening lament that soared and plunged, the unmistakable sound of desperate appeal. Silas scrambled to his feet, nearly upsetting his drink. "Should we investigate?" "Are you serious?" The words left me sharper than intended. "We have no idea what's out there." "But someone might be injured," Silas pressed, his face pale in the firelight. "We can't just sit here." Ronan retrieved his powerful torch, its beam carving a futile cone into the tree line, illuminating perhaps 20 feet before being utterly consumed by the surrounding blackness. "Listen," Ronan commanded, his voice low and steady. "No signal. We're 3 miles minimum from the vehicle. It's absolute dark, and none of us knows this terrain well enough for a nighttime search. Best we can do is stay put. If needed, we seek help come morning." The scream returned, closer now. 1/2 mile, perhaps? The sound resolved further, confirming a female voice, yet intrinsically wrong. Its pitch oscillated unnaturally, plummeting to impossible baritone depths before rocketing to a shriek that resonated painfully in the skull. Instinctively, we huddled tighter around the flames. Julian unsheathed the large hunting knife he carried, the source of our earlier Rambo jokes. No one was laughing now. "Maybe we should break camp," Silas whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Go back to the car." Another cry, closer still. Words swam into focus. "Help me, please, someone." "We're not moving," Ronan stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Stumbling through this forest now. Suicide. We'd be lost inside 5 minutes. We stay here, together. Keep this fire blazing." Silence affirmed his decision. We fed the fire obsessively, building it into a roaring bulwark against the night. Our shadows writhed against the tent walls, distorted giants mimicking our fear. The forgotten ales warmed beside the hearth. The screams persisted, a tightening cordon. Sometimes clear pleas for aid, other times raw, feral eruptions of agony or fury. The source seemed maddeningly mobile, appearing from one flank, then instantly from the opposite, never settling. Around 1 in the morning, it drew near enough for accompanying sounds to register. The sharp snap of a twig underfoot, the furtive rustle of disturbed leaves just beyond the firelight's reach. Yet each time we swung our torches towards the disturbance, the beams revealed only impenetrable darkness, the impassive trunks of ancient trees. Silas was the first to fray visibly. "This isn't right," he stammered, shivering despite the fire. "It's not. It can't be human." "Quiet," Julian hissed. "Everyone, just listen." We obeyed. The fire popped, spat embers. A distant owl hooted, then the scream erupted again, so terrifyingly close it felt as though the source stood just beyond the clearing's edge. "Please, oh God, please help me." The words weren't merely heard, they pressed inward, a physical weight against my sternum. A sudden pressure built in my ears, like ascending too quickly. Julian dropped his knife, clutching his temples. Ronan staggered back, nearly pitching into the flames. The voice warped, deepening into something guttural, distorted. "I see you. I smell your fear. Let me in." What does that mean, "let me in"? Silas's whisper was barely audible. "We're outside. There's nothing to let it into." A cold dread bypassed the need for interpretation. My body vibrated with a primal tremor that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Every muscle screamed for flight, a useless impulse against the unseen. The cries continued their relentless patrol, circling. They would seem to recede, offering slivers of false hope, only to detonate moments later directly behind one of us, jolting us around in panicked reflex. The voice remained a horrifying chameleon. The pleading woman, the aberrant deeper tone, and sometimes impossibly, both simultaneously, layered into a sound that defied natural law. Sleep was unthinkable. Entering the flimsy sanctuary of our tents, equally so. We remained tethered to the fire, arrayed back to back, scanning the oppressive dark. Ronan consulted his GPS unit, its screen flickering erratically, displaying our position as a jittering point despite our stillness. At 3:27 a.m., the impossible happened. Silas's phone shrilled. We all flinched violently at the sudden jarring noise. He fumbled it out, hands shaking. "No way," he breathed. "There's zero service." The screen displayed unknown number. Before sense could intervene, Silas answered, activating the speaker. The scream poured from the small device, amplified, terrifyingly clear. He flung the phone as if it were caustic, shattering it against a rock. From the fractured casing, the screaming persisted for several agonizing seconds before abruptly ceasing. Julian doubled over and vomited. I felt the bile rise in my own throat. Finally, around 5, the oppressive blackness began to yield, diluting to charcoal gray. As the first timid light filtered through the high canopy, the screams began to diminish, retreating. The very last sound was different, a prolonged, frustrated howl that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. It vibrated through the ground, shook dormant needles from the pines, and stirred the embers of our dying fire. Then silence, a profound, deafening silence, gradually repopulated by the mundane sounds of the awakening forest. The tentative chirps of birds, the sigh of wind through branches. We waited until the sun was fully clear of the horizon before dismantling our camp. Words were sparse, movements clipped and urgent. Pack, stow, move. The hike back felt exponentially longer than the approach, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need for escape. At the trailhead, the rusted Montana pickup was gone. Ronan drove us back towards Seattle, the car's interior thick with unspoken terror. Every unexpected noise made us jump. Phones were checked compulsively, now blessedly functional, ordinary. Later, attempts at research proved frustratingly vague. Ronan unearthed fragmented accounts on obscure forums, whispers of strange vocalizations in the serpent spine, but nothing concrete, nothing like our experience. Silas erased his meticulously captured photos, unshared. Julian listed his hunting knife online the following week. We seldom speak of that night. When circumstance brings the four of us together, the conversation steers clear of wilderness, of trails, of anything remotely arboreal. Yet sometimes when my own phone signals an unknown caller, I let the ringing expire, diverting it to the digital ether, a small superstitious ritual. I've taken to sleeping with a white noise generator now, a machine that blankets my apartment in a soothing, artificial hush. It helps, mostly, but occasionally, drifting on the edge of consciousness, a phantom echo surfaces, a distant, high-pitched cry, and I find myself wondering if the thing from the serpent spine wilderness ever truly left, or if it's still out there, perpetually circling, patiently waiting for an invitation inside. A Tuesday afternoon delivered the first tremor. Those boots are striking. Cobalt suits your gaze. A sudden frost bloomed in my veins. The ceramic warmth of my tea mug, poised midair, offered no defense. Red boots? Yes. And solitude, absolute, within the sealed confines of my apartment. Eyes unseen were upon me, charting my small movements from some impossible vantage. How? Privacy had always been my creed, a shield forged in the digital fires of youth. Strong passcodes were my ramparts, a minimal online footprint my camouflage. Yet against the siege that was commencing, such defenses crumbled like sand. My name is Elias, and this is the chronicle of my descent into a waking terror, orchestrated by phantom communiques from an unknown cipher. Initially, reason offered flimsy bulwarks, a misdirected jest, perhaps, a friend's elaborate prank, or some cosmic fluke, a wrong number paired with uncanny observation. Identify yourself, I texted back, a hesitant probe into the void. Silence answered. With a forced shrug, I relegated the unsettling ping to the mind's cluttered attic and resumed the rhythm of my day. The following dawn brought a new message, colder, sharper. The carbonara leftovers appear promising. Pity about the fuzz blooming in the fridge's dark corner. A glacial current surged through me. Leftover carbonara sat waiting for my lunch, precisely as described. And yes, shamefully, a forgotten container cultivated its own quiet ecosystem deep within the refrigerator's recesses. Coincidence imploded. A frantic ballet of searching ensued. Behind curtains, under furniture, scanning walls for the glint of a hidden lens. Nothing. My sanctuary felt irrevocably breached, the air thick with violation. I stood exposed in the heart of my own fortress. The digital missives persisted, each a new needle prick against the raw nerve of my privacy. You ought to return your mother's calls. 3 messages linger. That novel you're immersed in? The valet is the culprit. Did you realize you murmur in your sleep? Last night, a name surfaced, Clara. New tumblers clicked into place in my locks. Heavy drapes suffocated my windows. A few nights spent huddled on a friend's sofa offered no reprieve. The messages pursued me, relentless, omniscient. It was as though my tormentor moved through the ether, eternally beside me, behind me, within my very thoughts. I appealed to the authorities, presenting my phone like a captured cryptogram. Their response was a bureaucratic shrug. Without tangible threats, their hands were tied. Change my number, they suggested. Curate my digital self more fiercely. Ghosts of advice I'd already desperately embraced, to no effect. Paranoia, a meticulous vine, began its insidious climb, twining around my thoughts. Every street corner seemed to hold an observer. Every phone notification jolted me like a physical blow. Excursions beyond my door became fraught expeditions, undertaken only when unavoidable, each passerby a potential spy. Worry etched itself onto the faces of my friends. But how could I articulate this invisible siege without sounding fractured, utterly unhinged? One evening, after a message detailed with chilling precision the contents of a private journal secreted within my desk's lowest drawer, something within me fractured. I surged from the apartment, propelled by a desperate fury, resolved to unmask the puppeteer pulling my strings. I prowled the familiar streets, dissecting faces under the sodium lamps, scrutinizing parked vehicles, hunting for the slightest anomaly, the faintest sign of my stalker. Rounding a familiar bend, my pocket vibrated. Trembling fingers unlocked the screen. It's brisk out here. Best return indoors before you catch a chill. I whirled, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The street lay vacant, a stage devoid of actors, yet the weight of an unseen audience pressed down. In that stark moment, the sheer, suffocating totality of my helplessness crashed over me. This entity, this nameless cipher, wielded absolute dominion. They possessed the blueprint of my existence. I possessed not even a shadow of theirs. Defeated, ice creeping back into my marrow, I retreated. As the apartment door clicked shut, sealing me back inside my prison, the phone buzzed anew. "Welcome home, Elias." I slid down the door, spine pressed against the wood, a choked sob escaping my lips. How had the architecture of my life warped into this inescapable labyrinth, a captive under constant invisible surveillance? The ensuing weeks dissolved into a gray fog of sleepless nights, and days stretched taut with anxiety. I threw every countermeasure I could conceive at the phantom. A burner phone, new email addresses, scrubbed clean of history, even a relocation to a sterile, unfamiliar apartment across town. The messages inevitably found me. The new flat is agreeable. The perspective from the bedroom window holds particular charm. The haircut suits. Your stylist skillfully tamed that unruly patch near the crown. Leaving your laptop unsecured during bathroom breaks is rather imprudent, wouldn't you agree? Each text served as a fresh brand, searing the knowledge that solitude was an illusion, safety a forgotten myth, my sanity frayed at the edges. Was this real, or had I conjured this spectral panopticon from the depths of my own fractured psyche? I sought refuge in therapy, laying bare my terror in the hushed confidence of Dr. Anya Sharma's office. Even there, sanctuary proved illusory. A message arrived mid-session. Dr. Sharma presents a sympathetic ear. Unfortunate her current marital strife. Not even professional counsel was inviolate. My life was a nightmare rendered in waking pixels, and I was utterly powerless to press delete. A month into this relentless siege, the narrative shifted, acquiring a darker, more tangible edge. The message that materialized that day sent shards of ice through my very soul. I believe the time has come for us to meet face to face, don't you, Elias? My hands shook, rereading the words. The prospect of confronting my tormentor unleashed a wave of primal fear, yet beneath it stirred a perverse flicker of relief. An end, perhaps, a face to pin to the dread, a name for the void that had swallowed my life whole. "Where?" I typed, astonished by the sudden audacity that surged through the terror. The reply was almost instantaneous. The caffeine dispensary on 5th and Laurel, 3 p.m. tomorrow. Arrive unaccompanied. That night was a maelstrom of panic, oscillating between rehearsing confrontations and fantasizing about flight. But a grim certainty anchored me. Escape was futile. Wherever I might flee, this presence would follow. The following afternoon, I reached the coffee shop 30 minutes early. My nerves shredded wires. I claimed a table against the rear wall, granting an unobstructed view of the entrance. As minutes bled into one another, each arriving customer became a potential specter, their ordinary faces masks for the monster I envisioned. Precisely at 3, my phone pulsed. I have arrived. Crimson coat by the window. My gaze snapped up, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. There, seated alone near the large window, was a woman swathed in a crimson coat, middle-aged strands of silver woven through her dark hair, eyes that seemed intrinsically kind, crinkling slightly as they met mine and offered a tentative smile. She radiated an aura of utter normalcy, a stark dissonance from the monstrous architect of my misery I had constructed in my mind. On legs turned traitorously weak, I rose and navigated the space between us. As I lowered myself into the chair opposite her, she spoke, her voice possessing a warm, almost maternal cadence. "Hello, Elias. It is good to finally see you in person." I could only stare, 1,000 frantic questions colliding within my skull. When my voice finally emerged, it was a ragged whisper. Why? Why inflict this upon me? A sigh escaped her, a shadow of sorrow drifting across her features. "Oh, Elias, my intention was never to frighten you. I was merely endeavoring to keep you safe." Safe? The word felt alien, absurd on my tongue. By shadowing my every step, by burrowing into the most private recesses of my existence. She made a motion across the small table, as if to take my hand, but I recoiled instinctively. She withdrew, a flicker of hurt in her eyes. "I understand how it must appear," she murmured, her voice soft. "But you must try to comprehend. After Clara, after what transpired, I couldn't endure the thought of losing you as well." The mention of Clara's name sent the world tilting violently. Clara, my sister, lost to a collision of steel and speed 5 years prior, long before this invisible haunting commenced. How could this stranger invoke her name? As if plucking the thought from my mind, the woman continued, her gaze steady. "Clara was my child too, Elias. Your father. He never spoke of me, did he? Of the affair. Of the life he lived in shadow. The other hearth he kept warm all those years." My mind fractured. This wasn't possible. This woman, this orchestrator of my terror, couldn't be. "I am your mother, Elias," she stated, the words dropping like stones into the sudden silence. "Your blood mother. And when I lost Clara, I made a vow. I would employ every means necessary to ensure your safety, even if it required knowing your every footstep, your every hidden thought." The ambient hum of the coffee shop dissolved. My reality contracted to this single, devastating point of revelation. My entire history, a carefully constructed narrative, now lay in ruins. The woman I'd called mother for decades was not. This stranger who had systematically dismantled my peace for the past month was. "I realize this is overwhelming," she said, her eyes pleading for an understanding I couldn't possibly grant. "But please believe this. Everything I undertook from love." I surged upward, my chair protesting loudly against the floor tiles. Heads turned, the periphery vanished. My world had collapsed inward to this impossible moment. I require time," I stammered, the words thick and inadequate, before turning and stumbling blindly from the cafe. Bursting onto the pavement, I gasped for the cool afternoon air. My phone vibrated one final time. With hands that still trembled uncontrollably, I read the latest message. "I will be here when you are prepared to talk. I love you, my son." I powered the device off, the screen fading to black. Then I began to walk, directionless, adrift on the wreckage of my life. Everything had irrevocably shifted, and one truth resonated with chilling clarity. I would never perceive a simple text message in the same light again. The heavy door groaned inward under Elias's push, admitting him to the cavernous heart of the workshop. Above, fluorescent tubes cast a sickly, buzzing luminescence. A profound stillness reigned, thick with the scent of aged stone and settled dust. Weeks he'd labored here, his focus narrowed to the minutiae of fissures and discolorations, marring these silent figures. Statues populated the vast concrete expanse, a petrified forest on heavy plinths, some towering, others diminished, all bearing the patina of time. High walls bristled with the tools of his trade, legions of brushes, sponges, chemical concoctions, and soft cloths arrayed on shelves. Tonight, solitude was his only companion. The proprietor's trust granted him a key, free passage into this stone sanctuary after hours. Never before had anything felt aberrant, yet an unfamiliar tension prickled the air now. Elias navigated the aisles between sculpted forms, mentally reviewing the restoration agenda for the night. His gaze fell upon a marble effigy of a woman, her face serene, her eyes vacant pools. He lowered his satchel, extracted a compact torch, a delicate brush, and a vial of cleaning agent. A hairline fracture along her neckline demanded his attention. Positioning his work lamp, he leaned in, squinting at the surface. The marble felt cool beneath his fingertips, his hands reassuringly steady. Beyond the walls, silence, save for the omnipresent hum of the lights. A subtle current of air, source unknown, drifted past him. He glanced again at the marble woman, her arm. Its angle seemed peculiar. He recalled it differently, surely closer to her sculpted torso. Perhaps memory played tricks. He consulted his phone, scrolling through reference photographs stored within its memory. There, the image confirmed it. Her arm rested a clear 2 inches from her side. Now barely half an inch separated limb from body. A frown creased his brow. Fatigue, likely. He moved away, drifting toward another piece, a stern-faced man, bearded and imposing. Elias knew this sculpture intimately, having spent 2 nights meticulously cleansing its surface. He remembered the precise configuration of the hands upon their small plinth. Now the stone fingers seemed to possess a subtly altered curl. He leaned closer, scrutinizing the unyielding material. Stone does not yield. He averted his gaze. then snapped it back. No visible shift. The change was infinitesimal, yet a certainty began to crystallize within him. Something was fundamentally wrong. Deeper into the workshop he ventured, toward the rear where shadows pooled and the overhead lights offered less conviction. In a dim corner resided an enigma, a statue whose provenance remained a mystery. It felt older, more primal than the others. Its form hinted at humanity but lacked definition. A rough-hewn shape devoid of countenance carved from darker, denser stone. He traced a hand along its flank, cold as anticipated, but then, after a moment's contact, a faint, rhythmic vibration met his palm. He froze, holding his breath. It felt impossibly like a heartbeat thrumming deep within the rock. He lifted his hand, then pressed it back, firmer this time. A steady, almost imperceptible pulse resonated against his skin. His own heart hammered against his ribs. He snatched his hand away, eyes darting around the silent chamber. Nothing stirred. Retreating a step, he swept his torch beam across the assembled figures. Each stood immutable, silent, waited. Imagination, he told himself, forcing a long, slow exhalation. His mouth felt parched. Returning to the main, better-lit area, he skirted several other pieces, noting their positions with a newfound vigilance. The thought of calling someone surfaced, then submerged. The lateness of the hour, the potential absurdity of his claims. Focus on the task, he commanded himself. Retrieving his brush, he approached the marble woman once more. He raised the brush, the fine bristles beginning their soft excavation of the tiny fissure near her neck. A faint scraping sound punctuated the quiet. The acrid tang of the cleaning solution stung his nostrils. Tension knotted his shoulders. He kept watch on the statue's arm from the periphery of his vision. No movement detected. He worked for perhaps 10 minutes before another sound intruded. Not the lights, but something finer, a sibilant murmur. He ceased brushing, listening intently. Silence descended again, amplifying the rapid cadence of his own breathing. Then, unmistakably, a soft voice breathed his name. Elias. It felt impossibly close, directly behind his shoulder. He spun around, heart seizing. Nothing, only rows of statues, some shrouded in drop cloths like waiting specters, others starkly exposed. Sweat beaded on his palms. He wiped them absently on his trousers. He remained silent, straining his ears. The whisper did not return. He snatched up his torch and began a slow patrol toward the room's center, bathing each sculpture in the focused beam. Stone faces stared forward, impassive and rigid. He stood there, pulse thudding in his ears, waiting. Nothing happened. An experiment formed in his mind. He positioned himself a few feet from a sculpture he knew well. A headless male torso, just shoulders and chest. He recalled its exact orientation, having measured it meticulously while restoring a crack near the collarbone 2 nights prior. He deliberately looked away for a count of 3, then snapped his gaze back. The torso seemed angled infinitesimally, more to the side, perhaps a trick of the torchlight. He moved closer, crouching, examining the dust on the concrete floor around the heavy pedestal. No footprints, no drag marks. The base was immensely heavy. Moving it required significant effort. He reached out, touching the cool, still surface. He waited, tracing the edge with his light, but witnessed no further shift. Standing, he fought to quell the rising panic. Leaving seemed the most rational course. Perhaps he was too tired. his mind fabricating phantoms. A wave of dizziness washed over him. One small task, he decided, then home. He moved to a sculpture depicting a pair of clasped hands, beginning to brush away a film of dust. His strokes were measured, deliberate. He focused on the sound, the gentle rasp of bristles on stone. Nothing else. And then the whisper returned, quieter still, his name uttered twice, drawn out, Eli, as... He whirled again, torch beams slashing through the dimness. The statues stood sentinel in their profound silence, yet their very shapes seemed subtly altered now, imbued with a potential he couldn't quite grasp. His throat felt constricted. He swallowed repeatedly. A knot tightened in his stomach. He walked the perimeter, checking the heavy, code-locked door at the far end, securely shut. He keyed in the code. It functioned perfectly. He cracked the door open, peering into the empty, sterile hallway. The security camera's green indicator light glowed steadily. Normalcy. He pulled the door shut, the heavy thud echoing slightly. He considered calling the proprietor again, but hesitated, unwilling to sound unhinged. He was a professional restorer. He should maintain composure. Perhaps isolation was merely playing tricks on his perception. He found himself drawn back to the strange, faceless figure in the corner, needing to confirm the impossible sensation. Gingerly, he placed his hand upon it, palm flat against the rough surface. Cold initially. Holding his breath, he waited, his own heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the silence. After several seconds, the subtle thrum returned, pulsing faintly beneath the stone. He jerked his hand back as if burned, stepping away swiftly. Sweat slicked his forehead. He wiped it with his sleeve. His legs felt unsteady. Elias, he murmured aloud, the sound of his own name shaky and thin in the vast quiet, an attempt to anchor himself. He moved to a nearby workbench, his hand closing around the cold steel of a small chisel. He gripped it tightly. The gesture felt foolish, yet the weight was a small comfort. The whisper breathed again, so faint he almost doubted his senses, seeming to emanate from the very air around him, directionless. His name, elongated, spectral. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking, the sound swallowed by the high ceiling. Silence answered. The fine hairs on his arms prickled. His gaze fixed on the nearest statue, a half-finished piece depicting a figure bent forward. He circled it slowly, illuminating its face. The features were crudely chipped, the mouth slightly agape. He studied the shape of that stone mouth intently, looked away, looked back. The opening seemed wider now, undeniably so. He stared, leaning in until his face was inches away. The scent of dust and something vaguely damp filled his nostrils. He saw a minuscule gap along the chipped edge that hadn't been there moments before. Extending the chisel, he tapped the very edge of the stone lip. A tiny flake broke free, and then, beneath his fingertips, holding the chisel, he felt it, an infinitesimal shift, a minute settling within the stone itself. He stumbled back, nearly losing his balance. Retreating further, he swept the torch beam wildly around the workshop. Every statue now seemed subtly rearranged. Their limbs, torsos, the tilt of their heads. None were precisely as he remembered as they should be. He couldn't catch them in motion, but the evidence accumulated. With every averted glance, he tried blinking rapidly, hoping to perceive a flicker of movement. Nothing. Yet each time his eyes refocused, a new discrepancy registered. A head canted a fraction further, a hand subtly elevated. His breathing grew shallow, ragged. The pounding of his heart resonated in his chest, his neck, his temples. He fumbled for his phone, activating the video camera. Holding it unsteadily before him, he began a slow circuit of the room, documenting the silent assembly. "I'm in the workshop," he whispered, his voice trembling for the recording. Something's happening. The statues, they're moving when I'm not looking." He stopped recording, played it back. On the small screen, the figures remained inert, perfectly still. He stared at the footage, a cold wave of frustration and fear washing over him. The video captured nothing of the uncanny reality he was experiencing. What could he possibly do? He decided on one final test. Placing his torch on a shelf, angled to illuminate a nearby sculpture, he stepped back. He turned his body fully away, listening with every nerve ending. A soft, dry scraping sound reached him, impossibly faint, like stone grating against stone. His heart leapt. He spun around. The statue's arm was unequivocally in a new position. Certainty crashed down on him. He hadn't imagined any of it. Snatching the torch, he approached the figure. The stone was solid, cold, unyielding, but the arm's angle had undeniably changed. Heat flushed his face. He muttered incoherent curses, pacing in tight circles, torch beam dancing erratically. The whisper returned, insidious, calling his name. He tried to pinpoint its source, but it seemed to shift. Now near, now far, weaving around him. The vast room suddenly felt claustrophobic. He felt sweat trickling down his spine. He moved toward the exit again, the urge to flee now overwhelming. He gathered his tools, shoving them haphazardly into his satchel, his hands clumsy with tremor. He made for the door with the code panel, punching in the sequence rapidly, glancing compulsively over his shoulder. The statues stood frozen, yet he felt the weight of their collective unseen gaze. The lock mechanism clicked. He wrenched the door open. Before stepping through, he cast the torch beam one last time across the workshop's shadowed depths. At the far end, a tall figure notable for its missing arm was now leaning distinctly forward from the waist. It had been perfectly upright moments ago. His stomach lurched. He stepped into the hallway, pulling the heavy door shut behind him. He engaged the lock. His hand lingered on the cool metal. From within the workshop, he heard a distinct, muffled scraping sound. His throat felt like sandpaper. He swallowed hard. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed with mundane steadiness. He could breathe a little easier here, though his heart still hammered erratically. He walked quickly toward the building's main exit, his footsteps echoing on the polished tiles. He reached the final door leading outside. The air in this corridor smelled cleaner, less burdened by age and dust. He scrubbed his face with a trembling hand. His shirt felt damp against his back. A faint tremor persisted in his legs. He replayed the events, the impossibility of it all. He didn't understand. Would the statues remain shifted, or would they mysteriously reset by morning? All he knew with certainty was that re-entering that space tonight was unthinkable. Passing a small, darkened storeroom, he hesitated. A fleeting impulse urged him to check other rooms, to seek further anomalies, but he suppressed it. He'd seen enough. He pushed open the main exit door and stepped out into the cool embrace of the night air. He inhaled deeply, trying to steady his racing pulse. The surrounding streets were deserted, hushed save for the distant rumble of a passing car. The workshop building loomed behind him, silent and inscrutable. He stood there for a long moment, satchel slung over his shoulder, mind churning. Should he call the owner now? He hesitated again. What would he say? That he heard noises, that the statues seemed unstable. The words sounded flimsy, irrational. Home. He would go home. Tomorrow he could return, but not alone. He could enlist a colleague, feign the need for assistance moving a heavy piece. He would watch their face, gauge their reaction, see if they noticed anything amiss. For now, distance was paramount. He started down the quiet sidewalk, the tension in his neck and shoulders a palpable ache. He focused on regulating his breathing. His face felt flushed, and he repeatedly wiped his damp palms on his trousers. The memory of the faceless statue's surface, the faint, impossible pulse beneath the cold stone, resurfaced. The whispers echoed in his mind, repeating his name. The arm that moved, the subtly shifting expressions. He glanced back one last time. The building's windows were dark voids. The large steel door remained shut. He couldn't see inside. He pictured the statues standing in the darkness, silent, unmoving, their blank eyes fixed on nothing. He turned away resolutely and continued walking. Reaching his car, he fumbled slightly with the keys, then climbed inside, locking the doors immediately. He leaned back against the headrest, breathing heavily through his nose, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. His heart still beat too fast. He started the engine, the familiar sound, a small comfort, and pulled away from the curb. His eyes flicked repeatedly to the rearview mirror, half expecting some impossible shape to materialize in the darkness behind him. The streets remained empty. The workshop vanished from view. He shook his head, trying to force his thoughts elsewhere, anywhere else. But the memory of that vibration under the stone persisted, a phantom pulse against his skin, intertwined with the lingering echo of the whisper. Sleep, he knew, would be a long time coming. My own bedroom. I never imagined it as a place of menace, this space I'd craved after the dissolution of my last relationship. Solitude, I'd thought, would be a balm, and for a few nights the quiet was deep, uncomplicated. I sprawled across the queen-sized bed, a territory reclaimed, governed only by my own rhythms. Then came the night, the familiar dark turned predatory. Lights extinguished, cocooned beneath the duvet. I felt it, a slow, deliberate sinking of the mattress beside me, as if an invisible form had sought rest. The very air grew dense, pressing in. My heart became a frantic bird beating against my ribs. Each inhalation felt stolen. Eyes snapping open revealed nothing but familiar shadows, yet the distinct impression of a body lingered, inches away. When I tried to shift, to sit, my muscles locked, seized by an unseen force. I lay pinned, staring into the void, uncertain if sleep or waking held me captive. Then the sounds began, faint, stifled breaths, followed by a low, sibilant whispering that defied comprehension. Movement, speech, both were impossible. Tension coiled in every sinew as I waited, a statue of fear for the distant promise of dawn. Sunrise broke the spell, releasing me into a gray, exhausted morning. A nightmare, I told myself fiercely, a bizarre nocturnal theater. I shoved aside the chilling certainty that I had not been alone. Throughout the workday, concentration fractured. Flashes of the mattress yielding, the proximity of the unknown, ambushed my thoughts. Imagination, I reasoned, a shift in my own weight, but the sensation clung, a burr beneath the skin. The experience felt too intimate, too unnerving to voice. The words themselves seemed tinged with madness. The following evening, climbing into bed felt like wading into chilling water. A small lamp glowed in the corner, a fragile ward against the encroaching dark, but the silence in the apartment seemed to deepen, to listen. Hours crawled by as I lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, sleep a distant shore. Just as exhaustion began to blur the edges of awareness, it recurred. The distinct pressure near my right leg, the mattress giving way. I surged upright, breath catching. The lamp's weak circle illuminated the rumpled duvet, the empty space. Yet a coldness, sharp and specific, traced a line across my skin, independent of any draft. Legs swinging over the side, I nearly stumbled, landing heavily on the floor. My pulse throbbed in my temples, sweat prickled my hairline. The moment hung, surreal. My gaze swept the room, windows latched, closet doors shut tight, nothing overtly amiss, yet the atmosphere crackled, charged with an unseen energy. I patted around, checking locks, searching for drafts, finding only normalcy. Still the feeling persisted. I was being watched. Retreating to the bed felt like surrender, but sleep remained elusive, arriving only in brief, troubled snatches, shattered by the slightest creak or shift in the shadows. Morning found me ragged, head pounding, eyes gritty. A colleague, Silas, peered at me. "Rough night, Elara?" I mumbled something about poor sleep, the partial truth feeling like a significant lie. Admitting the real reason felt impossible, an invitation to judgment. Lunch was a blur of scrolling through my phone, a futile attempt to crowd out the image of my own bed, now a source of profound unease. That night, I lingered in the living room, the television murmuring until fatigue blurred the screen. Exhaustion, I hoped, might be my shield. It was past 2 when I finally shuffled towards the bedroom, navigating by the pale gleam of my phone screen rather than flipping the overhead switch. I collapsed onto the mattress, squeezing my eyes shut, praying for swift oblivion. Later, a sound pulled me from the depths. Breathing. Soft, steady, unnervingly close. Perhaps a foot from my head. I froze, heart slamming against my sternum. Rolling onto my back with excruciating slowness, I fumbled for my phone. Its screen flared, casting a weak, spectral light. Nothing. Yet the breathing persisted, rhythmic, quiet, as if someone were deliberately trying to remain unheard. Speech felt lodged somewhere deep in my chest. Inch by agonizing inch, I slid backward until my spine met the cold wall. Then a new layer of sound. Whispers, rapid and hushed, unintelligible like fragments of a forgotten language muttered just beyond hearing. My palms grew slick. The urge to flee warred with a paralyzing tremor in my limbs. Somehow, summoning a reserve of will, I managed to stand. Clutching my pillow and comforter like talismans, I bolted, stumbling into the relative safety of the living room. The rest of the night was spent huddled on the couch, sleep impossible. Every settling noise of the building, every distant siren made me jump. My eyes kept darting towards the hallway arch, half expecting a silhouette to lean into view. Daylight brought resolve. I conducted a meticulous inspection, vents, window seals, the bed frame itself, the floorboards beneath. The room, though spacious, yielded no secrets, no hidden alcoves or structural quirks that could explain the phenomena. Everything was solid, mundane. Music became my next defense. A small speaker beside the bed played ambient tracks, a buffer against the silence. It offered a temporary reprieve, lulling me towards drowsiness. Hours later, a distinct tug jolted me awake. My blanket had been pulled down perhaps 6 inches. Eyes wide, heart leaping, I saw nothing. Then slowly, inexorably, it slid again. Inch by careful inch, as I watched in disbelief. My throat constricted, I yanked it back up, my grip fierce, only for it to be jerked away again as if by an unseen, petulant hand. For a moment I lost purchase, the comforter nearly pooling on the floor. Adrenaline surged, flushing my face with heat, even as a distinct cold spot manifested beside me. I sat bolt upright, forcing the word out. "Stop!" My voice cracked, thin in the charged air. Abruptly the movement ceased. The blanket remained still, but sleep was now unthinkable. The lamp stayed on, its weak glow a small comfort against the oppressive dark. I watched the shadows, waiting for morning, every nerve alight. Days bled into weeks. The bedroom air grew heavier, saturated with unseen tension. Twice, I fled to the impersonal sanctuary of hotels. Those nights passed undisturbed, offering blessed, empty sleep, but escape was temporary, expensive. Returning home meant facing that bedroom door, my stomach clenching with anticipatory dread. Bedtime became a looming ordeal. Even bone-weary, the prospect of lying down filled me with fear, knowing the presence would announce itself, subtly, terrifyingly. One evening, I attempted confrontation. Entering the room early, I switched on every light, bathing the space in harsh illumination. Sitting squarely on the bed, I spoke into the silence. "If someone's here, show yourself." I waited, scanning the walls, listening intently. Nothing. Minutes stretched. My pulse gradually slowed. Perhaps it was over. Perhaps my own fear had conjured it all. The instant I killed the lamp and lay down, however, a crushing weight descended upon my chest. Breath came in short, panicked gasps. My limbs turned to stone. I couldn't lift a hand, couldn't bend a knee. Raw panic flooded me. My mind screamed, "Move," but my body was inert. The breathing returned, intimate right beside my ear. The pressure intensified, a suffocating presence. When it finally lifted, I gasped, air flooding my lungs, and scrambled off the bed, limbs trembling violently, hands numb. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection was a pale, haunted stranger with dark, smudged eyes. Standing there, dripping water onto the tiles, I felt a profound exhaustion, a helplessness that seeped into my bones. Logical explanations crumbled. I had nothing but my own terrifying, subjective experience. The pattern solidified over subsequent nights. The sinking mattress, the disembodied breaths and whispers, the phantom tug on the blanket, sometimes a fleeting cold touch on my shoulder or leg, like the brush of an icy fingertip. Each incident elicited the same jolt of terror, the same frantic heartbeat. My nights became a landscape of hypervigilance. I took to drinking potent coffee late into the evening, staving off sleep until collapse, only for the presence to find me in my exhausted state. Rearranging the furniture offered no solution. Bright lights, flashlights, the drone of the television. Nothing deterred it. The feeling remained. Unseen, yet undeniably there. Sharing this burden felt impossible. Who would believe me? The fear of being dismissed as unstable, as fabricating this ordeal, kept me silent. I struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy by day, but my nerves were frayed thin. I startled at sudden noises, constantly felt the urge to look over my shoulder. Entering my bedroom sent a wave of anxiety through me, my chest tightening. I scanned the floor for footprints, the bedding for stray threads, any tangible proof. There was never anything, only the nocturnal visitations. A strange, grim routine emerged. Go to bed, lie awake, waiting, scan the darkness, jump at the whisper-soft breath near my ear, freeze when a gentle pressure nudged my back as if someone lay spooned behind me, hold my breath, willing my heart to quiet its frantic rhythm. The minutes stretched, elastic with tension. My body remained perpetually braced. It never escalated to a full assault, never uttered a clear word. It simply lingered, watching, touching, breathing. One night I thought I heard it, my name, Alara, breathed on the edge of silence. So faint I couldn't be certain, yet the sound sent a shockwave of pure terror through me. My knuckles whitened as I gripped the blanket. The cold spot on the mattress shifted, as if adjusting its position. Scrambling to turn on the lamp, I stared at the empty space where the presence had felt so real. Chasing shadows, a shiver traced its path up my spine. My mouth was arid, tasting of fear. I remained awake until dawn. Now I dread sleep, but I also dread the exhausted waking hours. Nothing provides lasting sanctuary. Sometimes on the worst nights, the paralysis returns, locking my muscles so tightly, even a scream is impossible. My mind scrabbles for a strategy, but how do you fight an invisible opponent? There's no intruder to evict, just this unseen occupant sharing my home, refusing me peace. At work, Silas and others ask about the deepening shadows under my eyes. I offer vague excuses, late nights, personal projects. My ex is a closed chapter. There's no one to confide in. My life has bifurcated, mundane days tethered to horrifying nights. Every evening, stepping across the threshold of my bedroom feels like entering a baited trap. The familiar tension grips my chest. My thoughts race, anticipating the inevitable. The mattress dipping, the blanket stirring, the cold, invisible touch. I've tried other rooms, but it follows. On the living room couch, the cushion has indented beside me. In the spare room, the breathing has returned, close to my head. It is not the bedroom that is haunted. It is my sleep, my presence in this house. Most nights now, I simply lie awake, braced. I don't see it, but I feel it. That insistent gaze, the patch of cold air beside me. It waits for vulnerability, for the moment my guard drops. Then a tug, an exhale near my ear, a sharp reminder, I am here. Sunrise is my only reprieve. The brief hours when I can almost breathe normally, almost pretend. But the dread begins to build again by afternoon. My nights are an endless loop of fear, tension, and deepening fatigue. I no longer question its reality, not in the sense of tangible proof, but in the undeniable reality of my experience. It remains formless, unseen, yet constant. an uninvited guest sharing my bed, leaving me trembling in its wake. I keep expecting a climax, a confrontation, but the pattern holds. Every night, the same quiet torment, the sink-in mattress, the chilling air, the whispers, the paralyzing grip on my psyche. I don't know how much longer I can endure this erosion of self, this theft of peace. Safety within my own walls is a forgotten memory. All I know is that when I lie down, I am not alone. Something is there, watching, breathing, holding me fast with fear. And every night I wait for it, because I know it will come. The waiting itself is a torment. The silence pregnant with the next whisper, the next shift of the mattress, the next cold touch in the dark. So this is my existence now. Lying here, waiting for the presence to stir, feeling its weight beside me, hearing its breath, sensing its chill. I don't know what it wants. I don't know how to make it leave. I can only endure until morning grants its temporary release. Then the cycle begins anew, trapped in my own home, haunted by an invisible companion I cannot escape. There exists a particular strain of shadow indigenous to spaces relinquished by memory. More than mere lightlessness, it's a profound stillness, a density suggesting the world spun on, leaving this pocket universe behind. Such was the atmosphere I inhaled the evening I committed to inhabiting Julian's ancestral cabin, nestled deep within tracts of nameless woods. My expectations were modest, a weekend steeped in quietude, perhaps a severance from life's relentless static. Yet the instant my boot crossed the threshold, an alteration in the very grain of reality became palpable. This wasn't the vibrant hush of wilderness, alive with whispering foliage and the scurry of unseen creatures. This silence possessed weight, intention. The cabin, a relic passed through Julian's lineage, had stood vacant for uncounted seasons. His invitation for a weekend retreat met with my immediate assent. The allure of escape proved irresistible. He and his girlfriend, Chloe, planned to arrive the following day, but I chose an early start, envisioning a solitary night as a balm, a hearth fire, the company of a novel, a communion with myself. Twilight was deepening as I arrived. The journey, longer than anticipated, snaked along a dirt artery that seemed less a road and more a passage, drawing me into an encroaching nowhere. Pulling into the clearing before the cabin, the sun's descent painted elongated, spectral fingers across the grass. The structure itself, weathered yet resolute, timber bones, a stone spine for a chimney, a porch gazing into the thicket's maw, embodied the archetype of woodland isolation, rustic, remote, and quiet, utterly, unnervingly quiet. Retrieving my duffel, I ascended the porch stairs. Each plank groaned a protest underfoot, a sound swallowed instantly by the surrounding stillness. The front door yielded with the screech of hinges long undisturbed. Inside, the air hung thick, redolent of damp timber and the slow decay of disuse. I located the light switch. It flickered, hesitated, then grudgingly cast a wan illumination across the singular main room. A hearth dominated one wall, faced by a sofa and mismatched armchairs draped in ghostly dust sheets. A kitchenette huddled in a corner, and a single door promised a rear bedroom. Neglect was the room's primary occupant. My bag dropped with a soft thud. I wrestled open a few windows, hoping to coax in the evening air. Outside, a breeze stirred, barely animating the leaves, yet it failed to penetrate the suffocating calm within. A prickling sensation, the distinct feeling of being observed, crawled across my skin. Nerves, I reasoned, the simple unease of solitude in an unfamiliar setting. Once the kindling caught and flames began their hungry dance in the hearth, a semblance of normalcy returned. The fire's crackle wove warmth into the air, its flickering light animating the walls with liquid shadows. I prepared a simple meal, curled onto the sofa with my book, and willed myself toward relaxation. For a time, the illusion held. The fire's radiant heat rendered the cabin almost cozy. The hypnotic pulse of the flames invited languor. Then came the sound, a soft, rhythmic insistence from somewhere beyond the cabin walls. Tap, tap, tap. I lowered my book, ears straining against the fire's gentle popping. Beneath it, the percussion continued, faint yet undeniable. Not random, not the scrape of a branch swayed by wind. This was measured, methodical. Tap, 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 as if seeking entry or perhaps attention. My pulse quickened. Rising, I peered toward the nearest window, its pane a dark mirror reflecting only the firelight's restless glow. It must be the wind, I insisted silently, a loose board settling, but the cadence remained too steady, too deliberate. Heart thrumming, I moved toward the front door, the tapping a persistent whisper against the silence. I snatched my flashlight from the duffel, its beam slicing the gloom as I eased the door open and stepped onto the porch. The night air was preternaturally still. The breeze had vanished. The trees stood like sentinels under the moon's cold gaze. The moment the door opened, the tapping ceased, leaving an absolute void of sound. I swept the flashlight's beam across the clearing, probing the tree line for any flicker of movement. Nothing. Only the brooding forest and the dark bulk of the cabin at my back. I remained there, poised in the quiet, listening, waiting. The sound did not resume. After several minutes that stretched thin as wire, I retreated, persuading myself it had been innocuous, a contracting beam, an old house groaning. I secured the door, bolting it firmly, and returned to the fire's dwindling comfort. Yet the disquiet clung like damp cloth. Focus eluded me. The book lay forgotten. Every creak of the floorboards, every spit and crackle from the hearth seemed amplified, echoing in the profound quiet. The shadows cast by the firelight seemed to deepen, to stretch with unnatural length. Then it began anew, louder this time, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, gaze snapping toward the windows. The sound originated from the far side of the cabin, near the unseen bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, steady, purposeful. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood, flashlight gripped tight, its beam trembling slightly. Opening the door again felt unthinkable. Confronting whatever waited outside was a prospect that chilled me to the bone. But the tapping persisted, escalating, demanding. Whatever entity lingered out there possessed patience, resolve. Flashlight beam preceding me like a trembling probe, I navigated toward the back of the cabin. The sound emanated from just beyond the bedroom window, so proximate now it felt as though it resonated from within the room itself. Tap, tap, tap. Reaching the bedroom door, I pushed it inward. The hinges shrieked, the sound obscenely loud in the taut silence. The room was Spartan, a bed frame, a simple dresser, the single window on the far wall secured shut. but the sound persisted, a palpable presence just beyond the glass. I edged closer, breath catching, and directed the light toward the window pane. Initially, nothing but the moon-washed clearing beyond, empty and still. Then, lowering the beam, I saw it. A stark silhouette positioned just at the clearing's edge, partially veiled by the deeper shadows beneath the trees. It was tall, impossibly so, its limbs unnaturally long and slender, seeming to merge with the surrounding darkness. No features were discernible, no face, merely the form, an upright void like a rent in the fabric of the night. Immobility claimed me. The flashlight juddered in my grasp as I stared, transfixed. The figure remained utterly motionless, save for a slight incline of its head, as if contemplating me. It issued no sound. It simply stood, an effigy of watching dread. A scream built in my throat, but died there. My feet felt fused to the floorboards, the frantic drumming of my heart the only sound I could perceive. Then, as abruptly as it had materialized, the shape pivoted and flowed back into the trees, dissolving into the gloom without a whisper. For what felt like an age, I stood rooted, staring at the empty space it had occupied, my thoughts a frantic scramble. Finally, my legs unlocked. I stumbled back into the main room, heart galloping. Sleep was an impossibility that night. I avoided the windows, huddled by the dying fire, flashlight clutched in one hand, my phone, a useless brick devoid of signal, in the other. I waited, counting the interminable minutes until dawn might bleach the terror from the darkness. When Julian and Chloe arrived the next morning, bright and oblivious, I offered no explanation for my pallor or the tremor in my hands. Packing swiftly, I fabricated an excuse for an early departure. They accepted it easily, preoccupied with unpacking. Driving away, I didn't look back. Some locales, I now understand, are meant to remain forgotten, adrift in their peculiar shadows. And sometimes the deepest wisdom lies in not knowing what watches you from the edge of the light. That rotary telephone, an ochre relic snagged from a flea market's dusty sprawl years past, was meant purely as ornament. Its brittle case and shell, fissured near the coiled cord, housed a dial that protested with a sticky reluctance if spun too eagerly. I'd granted it sanctuary on a modest end table in the living room, an aesthetic nod to bygone eras. Devoid of wall connection, bereft of any service line, it stood as a silent testament, a fossil embedded in the strata of my modern life. But roughly a month ago, the inexplicable began its insidious creep. The phone summoned a ring from the depths of the night. Initially, I dismissed it as auditory phantoms born of slumber's borderlands. Half-conscious, adrift around 2 a.m, according to the digital clock's cold glare, I'd registered a smothered chime that knotted my stomach. Sitting bolt upright in bed, straining my ears against the apartment's quietude, I found only silence. A dream, I assured myself. Yet the following night, closer now to 3, the sound returned. Less a sharp summons, more a submerged bell, as if tolling through waterlogged earth or immense muffling walls. A prickle of gooseflesh bloomed along my arms. My heart commenced a frantic drumming against my ribs as I slid from bed, navigating the familiar shadows towards the living room. There it rested, impassive on its table, the handset nestled correctly in its cradle. its form indistinct in the weak sodium glow filtering through the window. Lifting the receiver felt like disturbing a grave. Silence met my ear, thick and expectant, before yielding to a faint, almost subliminal static, less a noise than a low, vibrational hum. My grip tightened on the receiver's smooth curve. I waited. No voice emerged from the ether. A parched dryness claimed my mouth. Replacing the handset, I flooded the apartment with artificial light, banishing the shadows. Perhaps vestigial wiring lurked within the walls, I reasoned. Perhaps some errant frequency had found purchase in its antiquated circuits. Yet days later, the phenomenon solidified into a chilling ritual. Precisely at 2:47 a.m. every night, the ringing commenced. 4, perhaps 5, muted appeals before lapsing back into silence. Ignoring it proved futile. The sound burrowed beneath my resolve. My nerves frayed, raw ends exposed. I began anticipating the call, waking minutes before, stealing into the living room to stand sentinel in the darkness, staring at the inert object, the frantic pulse in my ears drowning out the apartment's low hum. Then the ring, a jolt every single time. My hand, when it reached for the receiver, trembled uncontrollably, and each time, the static, sometimes punctuated by faint, indeterminate clicks, or a rasping texture that might have been breath, might have been anything. After a week endured under this baffling siege, I resolved to remove the source. I carried the phone down to the building's musty storage room, consigning it to a dim corner behind a bulwark of neglected boxes. Relief washed over me as I ascended the stairs. The subsequent night offered blessed, uninterrupted sleep. But 2 nights hence, the familiar ringing echoed once more. Heart hammering, I stumbled from bed, propelled towards the living room, only to freeze at the threshold. It was back, enthroned on its small table. Impossibly, it sat, and more unsettling still, a cord snaked from its base to a wall socket. I'd never consciously registered disappearing beneath the baseboard like a burrowing root. My mind recoiled from the illogicality. I knew I had carried it downstairs. Tremors seized my hands. I knelt, yanked the plug from the wall's unfamiliar orifice, and lifted the phone. It felt unnaturally cold to the touch. This time I entombed it in my bedroom closet behind a barricade of forgotten coats, turning the key in the lock for good measure. That night at the appointed 2:47 a.m., it rang again. Stepping into the living room felt like crossing into a waking nightmare. The phone presided on its table. The closet door remained securely locked, yet the object had migrated. I snatched the receiver from its cradle with a strangled gasp. Static roared, a brief, violent surge before collapsing into delicate crackles. Then, through the electronic veil, my name emerged. Silas, repeated in a low, grating whisper. Silas, Silas, Silas. The receiver slipped from my nerveless fingers. My legs threatened to buckle. Retreating to the bedroom, I slammed the door, the sound echoing the frantic beat within my chest. Sleep was an impossibility. Morning found me forcing myself back to the living room. The phone waited placid as ever, the cord once again disconnected, lying limp beside it. A primal urge screamed to hurl it into the nearest dumpster, yet some countermanding force stayed my hand. Fear warred with a strange, compelling curiosity, not possession precisely, but an undeniable magnetism, a pull towards the enigma. Perhaps it was merely a desperate need for explanation in the face of the utterly nonsensical. I began setting my alarm for 2:45 a.m., a preemptive measure. It became a grim routine. Wake, wait by the phone, lift the receiver on the first ring. Static, whispers like dry leaves skittering, faint clicks. These were the usual responses. Sometimes straining, I thought I detected the ghost of a word, a phrase dissolving before it could fully form. "Who is this?" I'd ask into the void. "What do you want?" Silence or the ambiguous static was my only reply. One night was different. Amidst the usual hum, slow, labored breathing surfaced unsettlingly intimate. My own breath hitched, shallow and erratic. The pulse in my temples throbbed violently. "Hello," I ventured, my voice thin. "Can you hear me?" A sibilant whisper answered, unintelligible, murky as deep water. I strained to decipher it, leaning closer, but the sound remained elusive, fragmented. Hanging up, I stared at the phone, palms slick with sweat, mind racing in frantic circles. Sleep became a forgotten country. Nodding off at my desk became commonplace. My supervisor inquired about my well-being. I mumbled excuses about insomnia, unwilling, unable to articulate the absurdity unfolding nightly in my apartment. Who would believe such a tale? Friends might jest about hauntings, about curses, but the reality was devoid of humor, steeped only in a pervasive unease. My own home felt subtly altered, dimmer, the shadows deeper even under the midday sun. Every glance towards the phone was freighted with anticipatory dread. Irritability became my default state. Restlessness gnawed at my composure. Colleagues noticed the change. Their concerned glances met with my evasive shrugs. In desperation, I contacted a phone company, posing hypothetical questions about disconnected lines and stray signals. The technician on the line, polite but dismissive, had never encountered such a thing. Radio frequency interference, perhaps, he suggested, but that failed to account for the whispers, the chillingly specific static. His advice was blunt: discard the phone. Frustration coiled within me as I ended the call. I almost followed his counsel. Phone in hand, I walked towards the apartment door, but a palpable tightness constricted my chest, an invisible tether pulling me back. I returned the phone to its designated spot. Why this inability to sever the connection? A persistent thought whispered that tonight's call was crucial, that I needed to answer. That evening, I attempted normalcy, a meager dinner, the flickering inanity of television, a conscious effort to ignore the clock's relentless progression. I performed push-ups on the living room floor, trying to exhaust the nervous energy thrumming through me. Yet my gaze kept returning to the ochre sentinel. An agitated tension hummed beneath my skin. Sleep, when I finally sought it around midnight, remained elusive. I lay staring at the ceiling, a prisoner awaiting a predetermined hour. As the clock ticked over to 2:46 a.m., I rose, my heart accelerating its frantic rhythm. I positioned myself beside the phone. Punctually, it issued its 4 muffled rings. I lifted the receiver instantly. Hissing static yielded to near silence. "I'm here," I managed, my voice tight. "I can hear you." A faint whisper answered, coalescing again into my name. Silas. Sweat beaded on my forehead. "I'm listening," I forced out. "What do you want?" The static swelled, crackling louder, rising and falling in suggestive waves, as if striving towards articulation. For a full minute, I stood frozen, clutching the handset, every muscle taut. Then a single garbled word tore through the noise before the line abruptly died. I couldn't decipher it. The remainder of the night passed in wakeful vigil, my eyes fixed on the silent phone. The following day, I embarked on an electronic purge, methodically unplugging every device, television, stereo, lamps, seeking to eliminate any conceivable source of interference. The phone remained inert during daylight hours, but the ritual felt necessary. I even inspected the walls, searching for hidden jacks or anomalous wiring. Nothing. Night fell, the routine reasserted itself. At 2:47 a.m., the summons came. I snatched the receiver, holding my breath. The static felt harsher this time, abrasive against my ear, accompanied by a low, indistinct mumbling. "I can't hear you," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "Speak clearer." For a fleeting instant, the static receded, unveiling my name once more, chanted slowly, insistently, "Silas, Silas, Silas." A vice tightened around my chest. My hands began to shake violently. The urge to hurl the receiver across the room was almost overwhelming. Instead, I slammed it back into the cradle, panting, my mind a chaotic storm of fear and morbid fascination. What did it mean? I took to sleeping on the living room couch, unwilling to risk missing the call. A small notebook lay open on the coffee table, a hopeful repository for any intelligible fragments I might capture. But most nights yielded only the familiar tapestry of static and whispers. Occasionally, a dry, rasping laugh echoed faintly, or a sound like a stifled cough. Sometimes syllables surfaced, teasingly close to my name, only to dissolve back into the electronic noise. I scribbled random letters, R, N, S, disconnected shards offering no coherence. My apartment descended into neglect, littered with coffee cups, testament to my perpetual state of caffeine-fueled anxiety and exhaustion. Meals became hasty, functional affairs, mere fuel for the nightly ordeal. My existence began to orbit this inexplicable call. Social invitations went unanswered, texts ignored. Answers became my sole pursuit, chasing some elusive revelation, hovering just beyond comprehension. My reflection offered a stark portrait: pallor, shadowed eyes, wrinkled clothes. Every mundane sound, the refrigerator's hum, the floorboard's creak, became a trigger, jolting my frayed nerves. One night, I resolved to confront the caller, to assert some measure of control. When the ring came, I answered with forced belligerence. "Stop calling me. Leave me alone." My voice quavered slightly, betraying the anger I feigned. The static surged in response, escalating like an electronic growl, building to a crescendo before abruptly ceasing. Silence. A fleeting sense of victory surged through me. Perhaps I had frightened it off. Seconds later, the phone rang again, louder this time, more insistent. I snatched up the receiver. "What do you want from me?" I hissed. A blast of static assaulted my ear, making me wince. And then the slow, inexorable repetition of my name, sounding closer now, as if whispered directly into my ear canal. "Silas, Silas, Silas." I slammed the handset down, my hands shaking, my entire body flushed with a volatile mix of terror and adrenaline. I couldn't bear it, and yet I couldn't let it go. The following week saw the ritual continue, night after relentless night. My perception of time grew distorted, warped around the dreaded yet anticipated 2:47 a.m. I found myself counting down the hours, pacing the living room, sometimes lifting the receiver prematurely, hoping to catch something, anything, but the call adhered strictly to its schedule, never early, never late. Upon its arrival, I answered. My responses varied, sometimes calm inquiry, sometimes desperate shouts, sometimes pleading whispers. The result remained constant, static clicks, whispers, and the haunting echo of my name. Each call left me drained, terrified, yet paradoxically energized by the unresolved mystery. I craved a breakthrough, a coherent sentence, an explanation for the slow unraveling of my reality. I even attempted to capture proof, setting my smartphone's voice recorder beside the rotary phone during the call. Playing it back the next day yielded nothing but the faintest whisper of ambient static. No voice, no name, not even the distinctive ring itself had registered. It was as if the event existed only for me, within the confines of those specific moments, reinforcing my profound isolation. I was alone with this nightly visitation, my sanity the sole fraying witness. Then, a few nights ago, a shift occurred. The phone rang. I answered. The static coalesced into a low, resonant hum that pulsed rhythmically in my ear. A long, slow exhale followed. "I'm here," I whispered, my voice unsteady. "I'm listening." The hum intensified. A soft, shuffling sound, like fabric rustling against a chair, reached me through the line. My scalp prickled. I braced myself for a voice. Instead, a sudden, inexplicable chill descended upon the room, a pocket of unnatural winter blooming around me. My breath hitched. The living room felt instantly icy. I gripped the receiver tighter, my knuckles white. Then came a faint, deliberate scraping noise, thin and metallic, like fingernails drawn across slate. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came. The line went dead. I stood there panting, the cold plastic of the phone still pressed against my ear. This precipitated one final desperate attempt at disposal. I swaddled the phone in layers of thick plastic refuse bags, binding them tightly with duct tape until it resembled a grotesque mummy. I drove miles out of the city, navigating past silent industrial parks, until I found a large rusted dumpster behind a derelict warehouse. With a feeling akin to disposing of hazardous waste, I heaved the taped bundle inside. The drive home was fraught, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. That night, exhaustion claimed me early. I prayed for peace, but at 2:47 a.m., the muffled ring jolted me awake. I shot upright in bed, a familiar dread seizing my chest. Racing to the living room, I stopped dead. There it sat on its table, stripped bare of all plastic and tape. The handset lay beside the cradle, askew as if recently used. The cord was plugged firmly into the wall socket. A wave of nausea washed over me. My head throbbed. Tentatively, I picked up the receiver. Static hissed. "I can't take this anymore." The words tore from my raw throat. The static sharpened, then softened into that chillingly familiar whisper, repeating my name. "Silas, Silas." I hung up, stood paralyzed for a moment, then lunged for my cell phone. Who would I call? The police? A friend? What could I possibly say? Defeated, I lowered my phone, my gaze drawn inexorably back to the cursed rotary device. Now I am trapped. I wait for 2:47 a.m., knowing its arrival is as certain as the turning of the earth. I hover on the precipice of some terrible revelation, yet simultaneously feel the foundations of my own mind crumbling. My heart races merely thinking about the next call. The apartment shrinks around me. The walls feel closer, listening. I try to avoid the living room after darkness falls, but as the hour approaches, an irresistible compulsion draws me in. I creep towards the table, pulse thundering, and wait for the ring. It always comes. I always answer. I see no way to stop this, no way to comprehend it. And each night, the static seems marginally clearer, the whispers infinitesimally bolder. Sometimes, long after I've hung up, I think I hear my name echoing in the silence of my own skull. What awaits if I cease to answer? What awaits if I continue? I don't know, but the compulsion remains absolute. I lift the receiver every single time, feeling the tension coil ever tighter in my chest. Something demands my audience, and a terrified, fragmented part of me desperately needs to understand why. The solitary echo of my steps, a sharp counterpoint to the vast quiet, announced my lingering presence in the hollows of Blackwood Academy. Late hours were the teacher's familiar burden, yet this particular dusk breathed a chill that settled deep in my bones. Down the long corridor, a fluorescent tube sputtered fitfully, painting the locker-lined expanse with jittery, elongated shadows. My pace involuntarily quickened. The urge to conquer the final stack of student reflections and flee this stillness grew insistent. I nudged open the heavy door to my domain. The usual aroma, a blend of chalk dust and aging paper, hung thick and strangely suffocating in the profound silence. Settling behind my desk, I switched on the lamp, its amber glow carving a small haven from the encroaching gloom. The pile of assignments seemed to loom, an Everest of adolescent prose, but determination steadied my hand. Perhaps an hour bled into 2. Time lost its edges, submerged as I was in the currents of my students' thoughts. Then the resonant slam of a distant door ripped through the building's slumber, jolting me upright. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held my breath, listening intently into the void that followed. Nothing. Just the old building settling, I told myself. A flimsy shield against the unease prickling my skin. Yet, as my gaze returned to the page, a dissonant thought surfaced. I'd secured the outer doors myself. Wind couldn't breach locked barriers. Focus fractured. The words blurred, meaningless squiggles on paper. Every ambient sigh, the ventilation's low drone, the measured tick of the wall clock magnified, becoming unnervingly distinct. My eyes kept flicking towards the darkened threshold of the classroom. Another sound severed the quiet. Footfalls, measured, heavy, advancing down the hallway. A cold knot formed in my gut. The custodian. No, Silas wouldn't arrive for hours, and these steps possessed a weight, a deliberate rhythm that spoke of intent. Slowly, cautiously, I rose, the scrape of my chair legs screeching indecently loud in the stillness. Hello? The word emerged thin, tremulous. Is anyone out there? The footsteps ceased. Silence rushed back in, heavier, more menacing than the sound it replaced. I stood rigid, every nerve straining, gaze locked on the obsidian rectangle of the open doorway. And then, a shape slid past the frosted glass panel beside the door. Not a trick of the weary eye, not a phantom conjured by fear. Someone lurked just beyond. My hand scrabbled instinctively for my phone before I remembered with a silent curse. It lay dormant in my car. The sturdy landline on the desk felt leagues away. I edged towards it, eyes riveted to the door. As my fingers grazed the cool plastic of the receiver, the footsteps resumed. Quicker now, closing the distance. Just as my hand closed around the handset, the world plunged into absolute blackness. A scream died in my throat. My free hand swept blindly across the desk, searching for the lamp, knocking it over with a clatter that reverberated through the sudden dark. Outside, the pace quickened to a run. Time had evaporated. Abandoning the useless phone, I dropped low, scrambling beneath the solid refuge of my desk, praying the ink-black void would conceal me. My breath hitched in ragged, shallow gasps. I pressed a hand over my mouth, desperate to stifle the sound. The classroom door groaned open on protesting hinges. Heavy treads entered, moving with unnerving deliberation. From my cramped haven, I saw only a pair of sturdy boots traversing the floorboards. "I know you're in here," a voice resonated low and laced with threat. "Come out, come out." I shrank further into the shadows beneath the desk, the frantic thudding of my heart a betraying drumbeat. The boots halted directly before my hiding place. I held my breath until my lungs burned. A hand slammed onto the desktop above me. Papers fluttered down, whispering past my face. Paralyzed, I watched as the figure slowly stooped. A face materialized in the gap, eyes catching some unseen glimmer in the profound darkness. "Found you," he breathed, a terrible smile twisting his lips. Terror unleashed my voice in a raw, primal shriek. Adrenaline surged white-hot. I kicked out blindly, connecting solidly with his face. A sharp curse, a grunt of pain, my chance. I scrambled frantically from beneath the desk, stumbling over my own feet in the disorienting blackness. I bolted for the door, not risking a backward glance. The hallway unfurled like an endless, lightless tunnel. Behind me, his heavier footfalls pounded the linoleum, gaining. My lungs were fire, sheer terror propelling me onward. I veered sharply, aiming for the stairwell. If I could reach the ground floor, the main doors. I slammed through the stairwell entrance, taking the steps in desperate, bounding leaps. He was close, his harsh breathing echoing unnervingly in the enclosed space. My foot slipped, ankle twisting with a stab of agony, but I pushed through the pain. Reaching the first floor landing, a hand clamped onto my arm, wrenching me backward. I cried out again, twisting violently. Off balance, we both tumbled a chaotic tangle of limbs down the remaining flight of stairs. We landed hard. The impact stole my breath. For a disoriented moment, we lay sprawled on the cold floor. Then, ignoring the fire screaming in my ankle, I clawed my way upright. The main entrance beckoned just down the hall. I limped towards it, a ragged, desperate gate, fingers fumbling in my pocket for the keys. Behind me, a groan. He was stirring, rising. My hand trembled violently as I jammed the key towards the lock. "Come on, please," I whispered, darting a look over my shoulder. He was upright, staggering towards me. The key finally slid home. A sob of relief escaped me. I wrenched the heavy door open and plunged into the cool sanctuary of the night air. The parking lot stretched out, blessedly empty save for my car, a lone island of potential escape. I lurched towards it, each step an agony. His footsteps hammered the pavement behind me, closer now. Reaching the car, I yanked the door open, collapsing into the driver's seat. Fingers like clumsy strangers fumbled with the ignition. "Start, start, please," I chanted, twisting the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared blessedly to life. A fist hammered against the driver's side window. I flinched, looking up into his face, contorted with fury, pressed against the glass. Without thought, I slammed the gear shift into reverse. The car leaped backward. He stumbled away. Tires screamed on the asphalt as I peeled out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, a lone figure stood starkly under the sodium lights, watching me flee. Even across the distance, the intensity of his stare felt like a physical weight. I drove, directionless, the adrenaline leaving me shaking, too frayed to navigate the familiar route home. Who was he? Why me? The questions spun, terrifying and unanswered. Eventually, the blue glow of the local police station emerged from the darkness. My hands still shook as I shifted the car into park. I sat for a moment, drawing deep, shuddering breaths, attempting to quell the frantic rhythm in my chest. Stepping out onto the pavement, the full force of the night's horror crashed over me. My legs gave way. I crumpled to the ground, harsh, racking sobs tearing through me. A uniformed officer, noticing my distress, hurried over, his expression etched with concern. "Ma'am, are you okay? What's happened?" I looked up, tears blurring his face. "The school," I choked out between gasps. "Someone. He was there. He chased me." Gently, the officer helped me to my feet, his voice calm. "You're safe now. Come inside. Tell us everything." Following him into the brightly lit station, a cold certainty settled within me. This wasn't finished. The image of those eyes, glinting malevolently in the darkness, would be etched behind my eyelids indefinitely. Somewhere out there he remained, waiting, watching. My sanctuary had irrevocably transformed into the geography of a nightmare. But I had survived, and survival was now the only imperative. Whatever lay ahead, I would meet it. Seated beneath the unforgiving fluorescent glare, recounting the terror to a detective with kind, tired eyes, I made a silent, steely vow. I would not be defined by fear. I would reclaim my life, and somehow I would uncover the identity of the man who had shattered an ordinary evening into fragments of terror. The night had ended, but the path forward had just begun, and I was ready to walk it.